An asteroid just appeared on the threat list with a confirmed trajectory, and the impact probability keeps climbing past the threshold where scientists stop hedging and start making phone calls. A government press conference happens, and somewhere in the middle of it, an official says the words that make everyone exhale with relief. We have nuclear options. Comment sections fill with confidence because you've seen this movie and you know how it ends. Bruce Willis showed you the playbook back in 1998. Drill into the rock, plant the bomb, split it in half, and watch the pieces sail harmlessly past Earth while Aerosmith plays over the credits. That's the trailer version, and the trailer leaves out about 60 years of physics research, saying almost everything in that scenario would make the problem worse. The real science of nuking an asteroid works completely differently than Hollywood shows, involves technology we legally cannot test, requires international cooperation from countries that struggle to agree on launch orders, and operates on timelines measured in years rather than the dramatic weeks movies give you. That's the fine print on planetary defense, and nobody reads the fine print until the rock shows up on the news. This is what actually happens when humanity tries to nuke an asteroid, so let's read that fine print together. Nuclear weapons work completely differently in vacuum than they do on Earth, and that difference changes everything about your survival odds. Roughly 50% of a nuclear device's energy on Earth creates the devastating blast wave you've seen in every test footage. That wall of compressed air moving outward at supersonic speeds and flattening buildings and trees and everything else in its path. The mushroom cloud, the shockwave, the destruction spreading outward in a visible ring. That's what your brain pictures when someone says, nuke the asteroid. None of that happens in space. No air exists to compress, no medium carries the shockwave, and no mushroom cloud forms because nothing exists to form one from. The dramatic explosion you're imagining simply doesn't exist in vacuum, and a nuclear detonation in space releases its energy almost entirely as radiation, with 70 to 80% emerging as X-rays, and the rest split between neutrons and gamma rays. And here's where the physics gets interesting instead of disappointing. Those X-rays traveling outward from the detonation point strike the asteroid's surface and penetrate only micrometers to millimeters deep, but they deposit enormous energy into that thin layer. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory simulations show the surface material heating to tens of thousands of degrees instantaneously, whether that material turns out to be silicate rock, iron, or ice. That superheated surface doesn't just sit there glowing. Violent vaporization follows, with plasma jetting away from the asteroid at thousands of meters per second. Newton's third law handles the rest because every action produces an equal and opposite reaction, and all that material blasting off one side of the asteroid pushes the asteroid itself in the other direction. You've essentially turned half the asteroid's surface into a temporary rocket engine, using nuclear energy to generate thrust without ever touching the rock directly. Sandia National Laboratories validated this physics in September 2024 using the Z machine, the world's most powerful laboratory X-ray source. Physicist Nathan Moore suspended mock asteroids on ultra-thin foil and blasted them with X-ray bursts equivalent to nuclear output, and the samples accelerated to 155 miles per hour from a standing start. The technique carries a name in the literature: standoff detonation. You don't land on the asteroid, you don't drill into it, and you definitely don't plant the bomb inside like a movie hero with a death wish. And here's what the movies get catastrophically wrong. The Armageddon approach of drilling in and detonating internally would almost certainly shatter the asteroid into multiple fragments, and NASA's first planetary defense officer, Lindley Johnson, described that outcome with a phrase that should concern you: "You've converted a rifle ball into buckshot." Instead of one impact site, you now face dozens, scattered across a wider area, but still arriving at Earth with the same total kinetic energy. Correct approach means detonating at a carefully calculated distance above the surface, close enough for the X-rays to deposit useful energy, but far enough to avoid shattering the target. For a 1 megaton device targeting a 500-meter asteroid, LLNL simulations put optimal standoff distance at approximately 100 meters from the surface. Detonate closer, and you risk fragmentation. Detonate farther, and the inverse square law eats your energy density before it reaches the target. That's the first piece of fine print the movies skip entirely. The dramatic explosion you're picturing doesn't exist, and the dramatic drilling mission would make the problem worse. But none of that matters if you don't have time to launch anything, and the timing math might be the most important part of this entire conversation.
Please consider liking and subscribing. I spent a ton of time researching this topic for you, and I'd appreciate your support greatly. Thanks a lot.
1 centimeter per second of velocity change, applied 10 years before impact, translates to roughly 3,150 kilometers of deflection at Earth. That number should reshape how you think about planetary defense. That tiny nudge, imperceptible to human senses and slower than a casual walking pace, accumulates over a decade into a missed distance greater than Earth's radius by a factor of 250. The asteroid doesn't need to be knocked into a different zip code. It just needs to arrive at the intersection point when Earth isn't there anymore, and the solar system's orbital mechanics handle the multiplication for free. Timeline matters more than payload. A small push applied early beats a massive intervention applied late, every single time. Your intuition says, bigger bomb equals better outcome, and your intuition is wrong. The 2022 DART mission demonstrated this principle at small scale when NASA deliberately crashed a 570-kilogram spacecraft into asteroid Dimorphos at 6.6 kilometers per second. That impact changed the asteroid's velocity by just 2.7 millimeters per second, roughly the speed of a garden snail on a leisurely afternoon, and that tiny change shortened the orbital period by 33 minutes. Nuclear devices can deliver centimeters to meters per second of velocity change, orders of magnitude more than kinetic impactors like DART. Promotional materials love that comparison. Here's the fine print they skip. You still need years of warning to make it work. LLNL calculated the minimum mission timeline for a Bennu-class asteroid at 7.4 years, covering spacecraft construction, mission planning, launch windows, and transit time. That's not bureaucratic delay, that's physics and orbital mechanics, setting hard constraints on how fast anything can reach an asteroid. And this is where it gets worse. Decades of warning means gentle nudges in the millimeter per second range provide comfortable safety margins. Months of warning means the math changes completely, shifting from deflection to disruption, from steering the asteroid gently away to shattering it and hoping most of the pieces miss your planet. Research shows disruption can still work in emergencies, with simulations demonstrating that over 99.5% of an asteroid's mass can deflect off the impact trajectory even with less than 1 month of warning. The press release stops there. Here's the next sentence they don't include. When disruption happens, tens of days before impact, less than 1% of the initial mass would reach Earth. That sounds reassuring until you run the numbers on what 1% actually means for your survival. A kilometer-wide asteroid masses somewhere around 1.5 billion tons. 1% of that still leaves 15 million tons of rock arriving at Earth, just scattered across a wider area instead of concentrated in one spot. You've traded one extinction-level impact for dozens of city-killer impacts spread across a continent. The movie version gives your heroes 18 days to save the world and makes it work through willpower and sacrifice. The physics version says 18 days means you're choosing between bad outcomes and worse outcomes, with no good options remaining on the table. Feeling confident about those nuclear options yet? We should probably talk about what's actually out there, because the detection numbers aren't going to make you feel better. Astronomers have cataloged 37,378 near-Earth objects as of December 2024, with 2,465 of those classified as potentially hazardous asteroids based on size and orbital proximity. Your planetary defense system tracks these objects continuously, updating trajectories, calculating probabilities, monitoring for any changes that push risk above the threshold for concern. Those numbers sound thorough. Detection percentages tell a different story. For asteroids larger than 1 kilometer, the extinction level threshold where impact triggers global climate effects comparable to nuclear winter, detection sits at roughly 93% complete. Scientists have found 867 of these objects, and statistical models suggest only a handful remain undiscovered. If something that size heads for you, odds are good someone has already spotted it. Here's where the fine print gets uncomfortable. For the 140-meter threshold, large enough to devastate a region the size of a European country and classified as the minimum for potentially hazardous designation, detection drops to approximately 43% complete. More than half of the asteroids capable of erasing a major metropolitan area from the map remain undiscovered and untracked. Size thresholds tell you what you're gambling against. A 50-meter object, roughly Tunguska class, can flatten 830 square miles of forest and probably wouldn't show up in telescopes until weeks before impact. Tunguska arrived in 1908 with zero warning and detonated with the force of 12 megatons, and the only reason it didn't kill millions is that it happened to hit Siberian wilderness instead of Siberian cities. A 140-meter object destroys regions. 1 kilometer triggers global catastrophe with crop failures spanning years. 10 to 15 kilometers, Chicxulub class, ends your species' dominance of this planet the same way it ended the dinosaurs. NASA's NEO Surveyor mission passed critical design review in February 2025, with a target launch in late 2027, aiming to find 2/3 of hazardous NEOs larger than 140 meters within its 5-year mission. That timeline means the current detection gap persists until roughly 2032 at the earliest. And even after Surveyor completes its work, approximately 1/3 of regionally threatening asteroids will remain uncatalogued. Warning time that makes deflection comfortable instead of desperate depends entirely on finding these objects early, and the infrastructure to find them hasn't launched yet. Your species currently flies partially blind through a shooting gallery, building better eyes as fast as bureaucracy and budgets allow, hoping nothing large enough to matter arrives before the new detection systems come online. And here's what really keeps planetary defense scientists awake at night. Even if you detect the threat with decades to spare and develop the perfect nuclear deflection mission, you still face a problem that has nothing to do with physics. You legally cannot test your only effective option. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 prohibits placing objects carrying nuclear weapons in orbit around Earth, installing such weapons on celestial bodies, or stationing them in outer space in any other manner. The Limited Test Ban Treaty of 1963 explicitly prohibits any nuclear weapon test explosion or any other nuclear explosion in outer space, with that phrase, any other, specifically included to close loopholes for peaceful applications. Your species developed nuclear deflection theory, validated the physics in laboratories, ran thousands of computer simulations confirming the approach works, and then made it illegal to actually test the system before needing it. Z-machine experiments at Sandia proved the vaporization physics matches predictions. LLNL's computer models calculate energy deposition and momentum transfer with increasing precision. The science is solid. But nobody has ever actually detonated a nuclear device near an asteroid, and under current international law, nobody can. You're building a fire extinguisher that you legally cannot test until the building is already burning. Promotional materials for planetary defense don't mention this part. Here's the fine print. Legal scholars argue there might be flexibility in the treaty language. Georgetown Law's David Koplow notes that a planetary defense mission might not have to orbit Earth before redirecting toward its target, and a standoff detonation might not constitute installing a weapon on a celestial body. A device intended purely for deflection might not qualify as a weapon under treaty definitions at all. None of these arguments have faced testing in any court or international body, and the first real test would come during an actual emergency when lawyers would be arguing treaty interpretations while the clock runs down and the asteroid gets closer. And this is where it gets worse. The practical path forward runs through the UN Security Council, which could theoretically authorize an exception under Chapter 7 emergency provisions. That authorization requires unanimity among the 5 permanent members: the United States, Russia, China, the United Kingdom, and France. Each holds veto power. Recent history suggests achieving rapid, unanimous consensus among those 5 nations on literally anything represents a significant diplomatic challenge. Your species' only effective defense against large asteroids requires political cooperation from countries that spend considerable energy undermining each other's interests on every other issue. The asteroid doesn't care about your geopolitics. The asteroid follows Newtonian physics on a trajectory that intersects with your planet, and whether your species can coordinate a response in time depends on factors that have nothing to do with science and everything to do with whether 5 governments can agree faster than they usually agree. That's the fine print on nuclear planetary defense. The physics works, the technology exists, the legal framework doesn't, and the political coordination required would be historically unprecedented. That's the reality of what happens when your species tries to nuke an asteroid. The dramatic explosion doesn't exist in vacuum, and the movie approach of drilling in would scatter the threat instead of eliminating it. Timing math says early warning matters more than payload size, and more than half of regionally threatening asteroids haven't been discovered yet. The only option that works for large asteroids or short timelines can't be tested before you need it, because treaties written before the moon landing made it illegal. Actually using that option requires unanimous agreement from 5 nations that struggle to agree on anything else. The TED Talk version jumps from asteroid discovered to humanity saved without mentioning the 7-year minimum mission timeline, the treaty negotiations, the untested technology, the 57% of dangerous asteroids you haven't found yet, or the geopolitical miracle required to authorize the launch. None of that makes the press conference. None of that fits in the reassuring soundbite about nuclear options. All of that lives in the fine print, and the fine print determines whether your civilization continues. Capability exists in theory. Sandia proved the physics works. LLNL ran the simulations. The 2022 DART mission showed kinetic impactors perform better than predicted, with a momentum enhancement factor of 3.6 instead of the expected 1.5 to 2. Scientific consensus holds that nuclear standoff detonation represents the only current option for short warning scenarios or asteroids larger than 500 meters, capable of deflecting objects up to 4.4 kilometers wide with a single, well-placed 1 megaton device. Infrastructure exists in framework. The International Asteroid Warning Network coordinates detection efforts. The Space Mission Planning Advisory Group links 18 space agencies worldwide. At the 2023 Planetary Defense Conference, the international exercise recommended nuclear deflection as having the highest probability of success for their simulated large asteroid scenario. But the gap between capability and deployment remains filled with legal barriers, political coordination requirements, detection gaps, and the fundamental uncertainty of technology that cannot be tested until everything depends on it working perfectly the first time. Planetary defense experts describe nuclear deflection as an insurance policy you maintain but hope never to cash. That framing captures something true, but it misses something important. Insurance policies get tested through actuarial tables and claims processing. This insurance policy gets tested once, when the rock appears on the threat list, and your species finds out whether all those simulations and treaties and diplomatic relationships add up to survival. That's the contract nobody reads before assuming the cavalry will arrive in time. The cavalry might arrive. The physics says it could work. The fine print says the outcome depends on factors that have nothing to do with physics and everything to do with whether humans can cooperate under pressure better than humans usually cooperate under pressure. What's the next cosmic death sentence you want the fine print on? I've been reading about what happens inside a spacecraft when the radiation shielding falls short of the design specs, and the dosimeter readings tell a story the mission patches never show.